It was a quiet suburban neighborhood, the kind where everyone knows everyone, and the days pass by in a blur of normalcy. My family had just moved into the area, and everything seemed perfect. The house was nice, the neighborhood friendly, and the school just a short walk away. But from the moment we stepped foot in our new home, something felt off. It wasn't the house itself, it was the people, or rather, the lack of people. The first few days were normal enough. We unpacked, settled in, and tried to get to know the neighbors. But something about this place just felt strange. There were whispers in the air, hushed conversations between the adults, and children who seemed to look over their shoulders more than they should. It wasn't until a week later that I met Jeff. I was walking home from the store when I saw him. He was standing in front of a house at the end of the block, leaning against a fence. He had a strange, almost unsettling air about him, but there was nothing too out of the ordinary at first glance. Jeff was a teenager, maybe a couple of years older than me. His skin was pale, his dark hair messy and falling into his face. His eyes, though, were the most striking feature. They were dark, like the kind of black hole that swallowed everything around them. There was no warmth to them, no life, just an endless void. I stopped for a moment, unsure whether to say something or keep walking. As if sensing my hesitation, Jeff turned his head and looked directly at me, and then he smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. It wasn't friendly or inviting. It was wrong. It stretched across his face unnaturally, revealing teeth that were too sharp, too white, like something out of a nightmare. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. "Hey there," Jeff said, his voice smooth, almost too calm. "You new here?" I nodded, trying to act casual, but my heart was pounding. "Yeah, just moved in a few days ago." He smiled again. "I'm Jeff," he said, offering his hand. His handshake was cold, like he had been standing out in the cold for hours. I tried to ignore the sense of unease bubbling up in my chest and quickly pulled my hand back. "Well, it's nice to meet you," I muttered, taking a step back. I should get going. But as I turned to leave, I heard him say one last thing. "You'll be seeing more of me." I didn't know it then, but that one sentence would haunt me for the rest of my life. The days that followed were filled with strange occurrences. Jeff would pop up in places I least expected. I'd see him standing at the edge of my street, staring at my house from a distance, his unnerving smile never leaving his face. He never spoke much, never tried to engage, but his presence was enough. I could feel his eyes on me at all times, and the feeling of being watched never went away. I tried to talk to my parents about it, but they just brushed it off. "He's probably just a kid looking for attention," they said. But it wasn't just attention. It was something darker, something far more sinister. It wasn't long before the nightmares started. I would wake up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, heart racing, as if something was about to happen. And in those dreams, there was always Jeff. His face would be there, just inches away from mine, his smile wide, his eyes empty. "You'll be mine soon," he'd whisper in my ear. One night, after a particularly bad nightmare, I decided to take a walk to clear my head. I didn't want to stay in that house, in that room, with the walls that seemed to close in on me. I walked down the street, my feet carrying me toward the park, but As I turned the corner, I froze. There, standing in the shadows near the swings, was Jeff. He was watching me. "Can't sleep?" he asked, his voice cold as ice. I tried to back away, but my legs felt like they were made of lead. It was like my body refused to move, my mind screaming at me to run, but I couldn't. Jeff stepped forward, his smile growing wider, his eyes darkening with something I couldn't explain. "You're mine now," he whispered, and before I could react, he lunged at me, his cold hands gripping my throat. I struggled, tried to scream, but his grip was unyielding. The world around me started to fade as I fought for breath. But then, as quickly as it started, he let go. "You're lucky," Jeff said, stepping back. "I'm not done with you yet." The following days were a blur of fear and paranoia. I couldn't shake the feeling that Jeff was always watching me, lurking in the background. My friends started to notice too, how I looked constantly over my shoulder, how I flinched at every shadow. And then one night, I couldn't take it anymore. I decided to confront Jeff, to find out what he wanted, what was behind that terrible smile. I waited until the sun set, and then made my way to his house. It was dark, the streets empty, the only light coming from the dim street lamps. When I reached the end of the block, I saw him standing there, just like the first time we met. "You came," Jeff said, his voice almost like a whisper. "I knew you would." "What do you want from me?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Why are you doing this?" Jeff tilted his head, as though considering the question. "You really don't know, do you?" he said softly. "I don't just smile because I'm happy. I smile because it terrifies people, because fear makes them delicious." I froze. "I was just like you once," Jeff continued. "But now, I'm something else. Something darker. Something that feeds on fear, on pain. And soon, you will be too." His eyes gleamed with something twisted, and that was when I realized the horrifying truth. Jeff wasn't just a person. He wasn't just a killer. He was something far worse. He was a monster. The next day, I couldn't find Jeff. No one saw him around the neighborhood. It was like he had vanished. But that didn't bring me peace, because I knew, deep down, that he hadn't gone far. He was still watching, waiting, biding his time. And someday, soon, he would come for me again. As I lay in bed that night, I heard a whisper in the dark. "Sleep tight," it said. "You won't wake up again." The last thing I remember is the sound of laughter, low, dark, and chilling, before everything went black. I had just moved to a small, quiet town on the edge of a forest, hoping to escape the chaos of city life. The kind of place where everyone knew everyone, where the streets were lined with old brick houses, and the days seemed to pass in a haze of calm. There was no noise, no hustle, just peace. I had rented a small cottage on the outskirts of town, a place that seemed perfect for someone like me. It was cozy, tucked away from the main road, surrounded by trees and a short walk from the town square. The landlord had warned me that it had been vacant for a long time, but assured me that there was nothing wrong with it. I didn't believe in superstition. The cottage was old, but charming. Nothing to be afraid of. But from the moment I arrived, something didn't feel right. The first night, I couldn't sleep. There was a strange feeling in the air, as though the walls themselves were holding a secret. The wind howled outside, and the trees swayed ominously in the darkness. Around midnight, I heard a sound, a scraping like something dragging along the ground. I froze, listening. The sound came from just outside my window, followed by the faintest shuffle of footsteps on the gravel path leading up to the door. I told myself it was probably an animal, maybe a raccoon or a stray dog. But there was something about the sound that didn't sit right. It was too deliberate, too slow, like someone was trying to move without being heard. I pulled the curtains back cautiously and peeked outside. At first, I saw nothing, just the darkness of the night and the shadow of the trees. But then, in the distance, standing at the edge of the property, I saw him. A man. He was tall, almost unnaturally so, with a thin frame. His face was hidden in the shadows, but I could see his eyes, cold, empty, like they were watching me. He stood perfectly still, staring directly at me through the window. His expression was unreadable, but I could feel the weight of his gaze pressing against me. I stumbled backward, heart racing, my mind screaming at me to close the curtains. But when I did, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was still out there, just waiting. The next day, I tried to brush off what had happened. It had to have been my imagination, right? A trick of the light or the wind playing tricks on me. After all, I was in a new place, still adjusting to the quiet. But the sightings continued. Every night, without fail, I would hear those same dragging footsteps. And every time I looked outside, there he was, standing in the same spot, motionless, watching my house. His presence was suffocating, like a shadow that never left. I tried to ignore it. I told myself it was harmless. But then, one evening, I found something that made my blood run cold. I was walking around the property, checking the garden, when I found something near the edge of the woods. A small pile of twigs and leaves, arranged in a strange, almost ritualistic way. As I stepped closer, I noticed a piece of paper sticking out from underneath. I pulled it out and unfolded it. It was a photograph, a picture of me, taken from behind the trees. The chill that ran through my spine was unlike anything I had ever felt. How had someone gotten that close to me? How had they taken that picture without me noticing? I immediately turned and rushed back to the house, my mind racing. There was no way this could be a coincidence. Someone was watching me, someone who had been in my life for much longer than I realized. Days passed, and the feeling of being watched only intensified. I would wake up in the middle of the night to the sound of footsteps outside my window. Sometimes I'd see a shadow moving near the trees, always just out of reach of the light. Other times, I'd hear whispers on the wind, barely audible, but unmistakable. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, that I was just paranoid, but the unease continued to grow, gnawing at me until I couldn't ignore it any longer. One evening, after returning from a trip to the store, I noticed something strange. The door to my cottage was slightly ajar. My heart sank. I never left it unlocked. I quickly stepped inside, scanning the room for any sign of intrusion. At first, everything seemed normal, but then I noticed something on the floor, a set of muddy footprints leading from the front door to the living room. The prints were fresh, as though someone had been inside while I was gone. My breath caught in my throat. I could feel my heart pounding in my ears. I wasn't alone. I ran to the back door, locked it, then checked the windows. All secure, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was in the house with me. I grabbed my phone to call for help, but when I looked down, I saw a message on the screen. It was from an unknown number. "I'm closer than you think." The terror didn't stop. In fact, it only grew worse. I started to see him more frequently, not just outside my window, but walking down the street, standing at the end of my driveway. Sometimes I would wake up in the middle of the night to find him standing just outside my door, staring at the house. His eyes, those cold, empty eyes, watching me with a silent intensity. I knew something had to be done, but I didn't know who he was or what he wanted. I couldn't go to the police. How could I explain this? How could I tell them that a man was standing outside my house every night, watching me, with no reason and no explanation? One evening, driven by a mix of fear and anger, I decided to confront him. I waited until the sun had set, and then, with my heart pounding in my chest, I stepped outside and walked toward the edge of the woods. And there he was, the lurking man. He was standing there, just like always, his face hidden in the shadows. But this time, I wasn't afraid. I had to know who he was. "Who are you?" I shouted, my voice shaking with both fear and determination. He didn't move, didn't speak. For a long time, there was only silence. Then, in a voice that was barely more than a whisper, he said one thing. "I'm not who you think I am." And in that moment, I realized the truth. The lurking man wasn't just some random stranger. He was someone I knew, someone from my past. A person I had long forgotten, a shadow I had tried to bury. But he had been waiting, watching, all this time. The lurking man took one step forward, his eyes now visible in the dim light. His face was familiar, yet twisted by something darker. It was a face I hadn't seen in years, but one I would never forget. And then, just like that, he vanished into the woods. The police found no trace of him the next day. No footprints, no sign of struggle. It was as if he had never been there at all. But I knew the truth. The lurking man wasn't gone. He would always be out there, waiting, watching. And now, I knew too much. The silence in the town was just a facade, a lie. The lurking man was part of its fabric, part of its history. And as long as I stayed here, he would be watching me, always. The Porter family arrived at the mansion with excitement. Their old home in the city had been too cramped, too noisy, and Ellen, the mother, had always dreamed of living somewhere quieter. Ellen Porter, the determined and hopeful mother, gazed at the mansion as they drove up the narrow, winding road. The house towered above them, its stone walls weathered by time, windows fogged with dust, and ivy curling up the side like nature's own embrace. Despite the intimidating appearance, Ellen saw potential, a new life, away from the chaos. John Porter, her husband, was less enthused. He was a pragmatic man, practical to the core. The house was too large, too eerie. He had heard the rumors about the mansion, but dismissed them as old superstitions. Still, he couldn't shake off a feeling of unease that crawled over him every time he looked at the house. Lily Porter, their adventurous daughter, was thrilled. At 12 years old, she had an insatiable curiosity, always looking for the next mystery to solve. To her, the house was a treasure trove waiting to be explored. Daniel Porter, their young son, was more reserved. At 8, he was sensitive, and he sensed something strange about the place right away. He stayed close to his mother, his eyes darting nervously, as if he could feel eyes watching him. As the family unpacked, they began to notice strange occurrences. The house creaked under their feet, a low groan like it was waking from a long slumber. The air was thick with the scent of old wood and dust. Later that night, as they settled into their rooms, the strange noises began. It started with a faint scratching sound behind the walls, like something or someone was trapped inside. Lily, who was never one to be afraid, decided to investigate. She crept down the dark hallway, her footsteps silent on the cold floor. As she reached the staircase, she froze, hearing the distinct sound of footsteps coming from upstairs. But there was no one else in the house. She hurried back to her room, heart pounding, but when she looked out her window, she swore she saw a figure standing by the mansion's gate, staring up at the house. But when she blinked, it was gone. Lily whispering to herself, what was that? Meanwhile, Daniel sat up in his bed, clutching his blanket. He could hear it too, the soft whispering, like voices calling his name from the depths of the house. His heart raced as the temperature in his room dropped and the shadows seemed to move. Daniel softly, shivering Mom. The next day, Ellen stumbled upon an old journal while unpacking. The faded leather cover seemed oddly familiar, and as she opened it, she saw the name Margaret Hale written in delicate cursive. The journal belonged to a woman who had once lived in the house, but Margaret's life had ended in tragedy. She had written about the strange happenings that plagued the mansion, whispers in the night, doors slamming on their own, and the feeling of being constantly watched. As Ellen read through the journal, she learned of a hidden room in the mansion, one that was never spoken of. Margaret had written that this room held the key to understanding the curse that had gripped the house. But Margaret had never been able to find it before she disappeared. Ellen muttering as she reads aloud a secret room, hidden away. What could it be? Determined to uncover the truth, Ellen shared her findings with John, who reluctantly joined her in the search. As they explored the mansion, they discovered that the house had once been a grand estate owned by a wealthy family. But the family had mysteriously vanished, and the mansion had been abandoned for decades. But as they dug deeper into the history of the house, they uncovered an unsettling truth. The mansion had been the site of a terrible fire many years ago, one that claimed the lives of several people, including Margaret Hale. Her journal hinted that the fire was no accident, and that something far darker was at play. One stormy night, as the family gathered in the drawing room, the mansion seemed to come alive. The wind howled, and the windows rattled. The family felt it then, the oppressive presence of something ancient, something malevolent. Suddenly, they heard footsteps in the hallway. Heavy, deliberate steps. The family froze. The door creaked open, and a figure appeared in the doorway. It was a woman, her features obscured by shadows, but her eyes, cold and hollow, locked onto them with a gaze that seemed to pierce straight through them. Woman's voice whispering, barely audible, "Leave, before it's too late." Before they could react, the figure vanished into the darkness. The family realized that they were not alone in the mansion. The spirits of those who had perished in the fire were trapped within the walls, unable to move on. Ellen began to dream of Margaret Hale, who appeared to her in the dead of night. Margaret's voice echoed in Ellen's mind, warning her of the dangers lurking in the house. The house is cursed. We are trapped here, bound by the memories of the fire. You must help us, or you will be like us. Determined to free the spirits, Ellen and her family conducted a ritual to release the trapped souls. They gathered in the hidden room, the air thick with anticipation. As they recited the words from Margaret's journal, the room seemed to tremble. The walls groaned, and the spirits began to materialize, their faces twisted in anguish. At the heart of it all stood Margaret, her spirit tormented by the past. She reached out to Ellen, her form flickering like a fading light. "Help us, please. We are trapped. Free us." Ellen closed her eyes, focusing on the love and compassion she had for her family. She reached out, her hand trembling, and with one final plea, the house began to quiet. The next morning, the Porter family stood outside the mansion, the sun rising over the hills. The house, once dark and oppressive, now seemed peaceful, its tortured past finally laid to rest. But as they drove away, Ellen caught a glimpse of the hill in the rearview mirror. For a moment, she thought she saw a figure standing by the mansion's gate, watching them leave. But when she turned her head, there was nothing there. I never believed in parental instinct. I believed in reason, in process, in the idea that if I did things right, everything would be all right. Perhaps that's why I ignored all the early signs, things too small, too illogical to pay attention to, until my son started bleeding from his ear, and I insisted it wasn't his turn yet. My son's name was Aaron, 8 years old. He was thin, quiet, and had a disturbingly strange memory. He remembered the exact dates and times of things no one bothered to record. The last time the neighbors changed the hallway light bulb, the number of steps from our front door to the garbage dump, or the location of every crack in the ceiling. I used to be proud of that. I thought I was raising a smart, just a little eccentric child. I didn't know that his memory wasn't a habit, but a requirement. It all started about 3 weeks before Aaron disappeared. The boy woke up in the middle of the night and said there was someone in the room. No screaming, no crying, just sitting up straight in bed and looking toward the dark corner near the wardrobe. I turned on the light, searched everywhere, and found nothing but dust and the familiar musty smell of the old apartment. I told him it was just a dream. Aaron looked at me for a long time, longer than usual, then nodded as if he knew I would answer that way. Before lying down, he asked me a question that annoyed me for some reason. If a person stands still long enough in the dark, are they still considered a person? I yelled at him to go to sleep. In the nights that followed, Aaron began to remember the things he saw in the room. He said that each night, the person stood a little closer. At first, against the wall, then next to the desk, then at the foot of the bed. What chilled me wasn't the story itself, but the fact that he could describe the exact location even with his eyes closed, as if he didn't need to look to know. When I asked why he didn't scream or run to my room, Aaron calmly replied that if he did, the other person would understand they'd been discovered, and then things would happen faster. I began to notice that Aaron wasn't sleeping soundly anymore. His eyes were dark and sunken, his reflexes were slow, and he often startled when someone stood too close. Occasionally, I saw him tilt his head as if listening to something I couldn't hear. Once, when I touched his shoulder from behind, Aaron cried out in pain and collapsed as if I had squeezed an open wound. There were deep, evenly spaced, circular bruises on his shoulder, resembling fingertip marks, but much larger. The doctor said it might be from a fall. Aaron immediately shook his head and said the other person tried to pick him up, but wasn't used to it. On the 13th night, I was awakened by whispering in the apartment. It wasn't my son's voice, nor did it sound like any other voice I'd ever heard. It was low, wet, and had a strange rhythm, like someone practicing reading. When I jumped up and opened Aaron's bedroom door, I found him sitting on the floor, his back against the bed, his eyes wide open, staring at me. Blood trickled from his ear, thin but relentless, soaking his pajama collar. Aaron gestured for me to be quiet. I heard breathing right behind me, very close, close enough for me to feel the cold on the back of my neck. Aaron's lips moved, no sound came out, but I read it. Don't turn around. The next morning, Aaron didn't go to school. He said the other person didn't like the sunlight, but that didn't mean it didn't exist during the day. He started drawing. Hundreds of scribbled pencil drawings, all the same shape. A tall, thin body, joints bent out of place, and a head bowed so low that the neck was almost non-existent. In all the drawings, that thing was missing a face. Just a dark, blank space, as if trying to add more detail would tear the paper. When I asked why he didn't draw a face, Aaron replied that if he did, the other person would be complete. The night Aaron disappeared, I heard no screams. Nothing was broken. There were no signs of a struggle. I only woke up because the apartment felt too quiet, the kind of quiet that makes your ears ring from the lack of sound. Aaron's bedroom door was wide open. The bed was empty. On the floor were deep, round indentations, arranged in a row, leading from the bed to the front door, as if something had pressed its fingertips down on the floor to drag itself away. On the living room wall, I saw long, thin streaks of blood, not splattered, but swept upwards, forming chaotic curves, like the handwriting of someone unfamiliar with using their hands. The police found nothing. They said there were no signs of forced entry. They asked me about my son's psychological history. They didn't take notes when I described the person in the shadows. They used the word missing in a very light tone, as if it were a concept that could be folded up and put away in a file. 3 days later, I heard footsteps in the apartment at 3 in the morning. It wasn't Aaron's. The footsteps were too slow, each step accompanied by the sound of bones scraping against each other. I didn't dare open my eyes. I felt something stand by my bed for a long time, long enough for me to smell metal and something like stale meat. Then I heard Aaron's voice, very softly, very close to my ear, saying he was sorry for letting me see, but he couldn't take it anymore. When I opened my eyes, no one was there, but new, round indentations appeared on my arm, deepening day by day, as if something was learning to hold me captive. I realized too late that Aaron was never the final target. He was just the chosen one to open the door. And now, as I write these words, I hear that familiar breathing in the room. He doesn't need to hide anymore. He stood in the shadows long enough. And now it's my turn to learn to remember his location, if I want to live another night. A deserted country road winds through dense fog. Tall picks up, carrying a faint, whispering voice. Emily shivers. The front door groans as Jason pushes it open. The air inside is cold, stale, and smells faintly of decay. They walk in. Their footsteps echo in the empty halls. Dust swirls around. A grand staircase leads up to the second floor, its banister warped and rotting. Suddenly, a faint child's laugh echoes from upstairs. Emily freezes. Did you hear that? Emily edged Ging. Probably a raccoon or something. They The temperature in the room drops dramatically. Their breath becomes visible. Suddenly, the lights from their flashlights flicker. Shadows stretch unnaturally along the walls. A cold, unseen hand brushes Emily's shoulder. She screams. Jason grabs a nearby chair, swinging it wildly, but hits nothing. The room is empty, yet the presence is undeniable. A low, guttural whisper fills the room. On the floor, clutching each other. The cold in the room is unbearable. Their breaths come in short gasps. Shadows twist unnaturally across the walls. Jason grabs his phone, trying to her face in Jason's chest. The room grows darker, as if a shadow is spreading. A low, almost human-like moan echoes from the corridor. I want to leave. I want to go home. Emily crying. Hallway. The floorboards groan under his weight. Cold wind brushes past him. He shines the candle down the hall. A small, pale hand suddenly reaches out from under the staircase, grabbing at him. Jason stumbles back, screaming. Jason! Emily screaming. The hand disappears as quickly as it appeared. Silence falls. But now, faint whispers are all around them, echoing from the walls and ceiling. Whispers overlapping. Leave. Now. Go. The next morning, the rain has stopped, leaving a The air grows icy again. Jason grabs Emily's hand. We need help. Someone who understands. SUV appears through the mist. 3 figures step out. Dr. Marcus Vale, a calm, experienced paranormal investigator. Sister Helena, a medium with deep spiritual insight. And Liam, a tech specialist with a knack for detecting anomalies. Are you ready? Once we enter, there's no turning back until we've dealt with her. I don't know if I can. Emily trembling. They all enter the mansion. The doors creak ominously, echoing through the dark hallways. The team sets up equipment. Approaches a closed door at the end of the hallway. The temperature drops sharply. His breath becomes ghost screams, a high-pitched wail that shakes the walls. Furniture slides across the floor. Candles extinguish themselves one by one. Liam shouts, trying to record everything. Sister Helena steps forward. Christmas of 2019 was supposed to be the perfect getaway for my two best friends, Jamie and Chris, and me. We had all recently moved to the city for work, leaving our families behind. By December, we were all exhausted, burnt out by endless projects, cold commutes, and missed family dinners. So when Jamie suggested we rent a cabin for the holiday weekend instead of doing the usual family stuff, we jumped at the chance. A few days of peace, some good food, and zero obligations sounded like heaven. The cabin we found was located about 2 hours outside of town, nestled deep in the forest. It was isolated, too far to be considered a neighborhood, but just close enough to town to make it feel safe. There were only a few other cabins in the area, spaced far apart. I don't think we even passed another car on the way there. We arrived on Christmas Eve. The sun had already set, and the snow was coming down in thick flakes. The cabin was older, with high ceilings and a rustic feel. We brought a ton of food, snacks, and, of course, lots of beer. Chris even packed up his PlayStation. So we spent the evening playing games and drinking into the early hours. It wasn't exactly the kind of Christmas most people would dream of, but it was perfect for us. By the time we went to bed, I passed out almost instantly. The cabin was cold, and the floorboards creaked with every gust of wind, but I didn't mind. It was a cozy kind of cold, the kind that made you snuggle deeper into the covers and forget about the rest of the world. But that peace didn't last long. I woke up in the middle of the night. It was probably 3:00 or 4:00 a.m. The house was still, and for a moment, I thought I might have just had a weird dream. But then I heard it. Soft, slow footsteps outside my bedroom door. At first, I thought it was Jamie or Chris, maybe getting up to use the bathroom or get some water. But the steps were different. They were too careful, like someone trying to move quietly, making sure not to wake anyone. I lay still, straining my ears, trying to figure out if it was one of them. But no, it wasn't. I could hear the creaking of the wooden floors in the hallway, the sound of someone pacing, walking slowly back and forth. A cold chill ran down my spine. I wanted to call out, to ask if everything was okay, but something held me back. Maybe I was still half asleep, or maybe I was just too frightened to make a sound. I laid there, listening, hoping it was just my mind playing tricks on me. The footsteps didn't stop. They continued for what felt like an eternity, back and forth, just outside my room, as if the person was waiting for something or someone. Eventually, the pacing stopped. Silence returned to the cabin, and I forced myself to close my eyes again, hoping it was just the house settling. But sleep didn't come easily after that. My mind was racing. When I finally woke up for real in the morning, sunlight was pouring in through the living room windows. Jamie and Chris were already awake, sitting on the couch, eating snacks, and laughing at something on the TV. "Who was creeping around last night?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. I expected them to have some stupid story about going for a midnight snack or losing a phone. But both of them looked at me like I had two heads. "We went to bed at 2:00, Jamie said, shaking his head. "Yeah, I didn't get up once," Chris added, frowning. I laughed it off at first. Maybe I had imagined the whole thing, right? I was still half dazed when I woke up. But then I glanced at the front door. The lock was undone. Not just the deadbolt, the handle lock, too. Completely unlocked. My heart skipped a beat. I asked them both if either of them had gone outside in the middle of the night. Both of them said no. That's when I noticed the look on their faces. They were starting to realize something might have been wrong. I stood there for a moment, trying to piece things together. We were all pretty sure we'd locked the door before going to bed, but the evidence was right in front of us. The door was unlocked. Maybe the wind did it, Chris suggested, though his voice didn't sound convinced. The old door's probably just sticking or something. I didn't believe that for a second, but I didn't want to push it. We were all still half expecting some ridiculous explanation, hoping it was just a mistake. We spent the day doing what we came there to do: eat, drink, play games, and talk. But the weird feeling lingered in the back of my mind. Every now and then, I caught myself glancing at the window, half expecting to see something out of place. The forest outside the cabin felt too close, too dark. It was as if the trees had shifted, pressing in on us, watching us from just outside the window. The more I thought about it, the more uneasy I felt. But I didn't want to kill the mood, so I kept it to myself. Later that night, we stayed up a bit later than usual, playing some party game on the Xbox. The cabin was still freezing, and we had the heat cranked up, but it didn't help much. By the time we wrapped up the game and decided to head to bed, it was close to midnight. Mark decided to hit the sack early, but Chris and I stayed up for another half hour, chatting. I didn't realize how much time had passed until I lay down in bed. The room was pitch black, and the cold seeped through the walls like it was alive. There were no curtains on the window, just a thin layer of frost on the glass. That's when I heard it again. The footsteps. At first, I thought I was imagining it, maybe the house settling or the wind shifting. But no, these were footsteps, slow, deliberate, moving through the living room again. I sat up in bed, holding my breath, straining my ears to listen. This time, I was certain it wasn't either of my friends. They were still in their rooms and I hadn't heard anyone get up. The footsteps moved toward the hallway, then stopped outside my door. My heart thudded in my chest. The seconds felt like hours. I didn't know what to do. Should I call out? Should I check? I barely dared to move, but eventually I crept to the door, my hand shaking as I reached for the handle. Slowly, I cracked it open just enough to peek into the hallway. I couldn't believe what I saw. A man, tall, easily 6'5", wearing dark clothing and with long, unkempt hair and a thick beard. He was standing there, motionless, staring at my bedroom door. I pulled back quickly, my breath catching in my throat. I didn't know what to do. The door was still ajar, so I just froze, hoping he wouldn't notice me. But then, I heard it. The faint creak of the door. He was pushing it open. I scrambled to my feet, heart racing. But before I could react, the door swung wide open. The man was standing there, staring at me with cold, lifeless eyes. I screamed. I screamed so loud it hurt, but he didn't flinch. He just stared at me, emotionless, as if this was all part of the plan. Before I could do anything else, Mark and Chris came running out of their rooms, alarmed by my scream. But the man didn't fight. He didn't try to harm us. He just shoved past Chris, slamming him into the wall, and bolted out the door, running into the dark woods. We quickly locked up the place and called the police. They didn't find him. No trace. The next day, we packed up and left early. We didn't talk about it much, but the fear still lingered in the air. Had he been there for us? Or was he looking for something else? We still don't know. But one thing was certain. The woods were never the same, and neither were we.